Us working folk don't have a chance unless we organise. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Tell me, which side are you on?
Our speakers today are Senator Doug Cameron of the Australian Labor Party's Socialist Left, Dr John Kaye of the Greens in New South Wales Parliament's Legislative Council, and Amanda Carr of the Australian Services Union, and she's a local worker in our community's disability sector. Let's now hear what John, Amanda and Doug have to say. We'll take questions and comments after they have all spoken. John, you're up first.
Thank you very much, Tris. Look, I begin by acknowledging that we are meeting today on the land of the Darug and the Gundagaran people. I pay right my respects to their elders, past and present. I acknowledge this is Aboriginal land, always has been, always will be. It has never been ceded. We are here as their guests. I also want to pay my gratitude to the Blue Mountains Union Council as part of that great tradition of unionism that has made us what we are today. If there is anything which created the left, it was not the intellectuals, it was the people in the shop floors. And one of the greatest delights of my life is being invited every now and then to the retired wharfies. And it's terrific because you're in a room, about 500 retired wharfies. There's about a century, no, it's not about, there's about 10 centuries of political experience gained by those workplace discussions and that understanding. And it was the union movement that modelled for us what collective action could do and why it was essential to a left agenda. Before governments, before the idea of governments being involved in wealth redistribution, before the idea of governments being involved in creating a fairer society, unions were doing it for their workforce and for the whole society. And that ideology that grew out of the union movement is more relevant today than it has ever been. Don't let people tell you that because of declining union membership, there is somehow or other a loss of relevance of the lessons that unions taught us. In a world of growing global unfairness, in a world where neoliberalism is infecting every political party, the concepts of collectivism, the concepts of collective action, of people doing it collectively for the common good, could not be more relevant than it has ever been before. I really like the topic, what's left. It's a kind of socialist double entendre. It's really great. And there are two clear meanings to it. In fact, Trish, you had more than two, but I had two. The first, of course, is what's left as in the sense of what's left to do. What are we to do next? The other is what's left as in the sense of what is left versus what is right. And they're two sides of the same question, two sides of the same coin. Because if we don't know who we are, we don't know what we're going to do next. So I want to spend most of my time talking about who we are, defining the left, and then the consequences of that definition. And I think the most important thing is that we do it for ourselves. We choose our own definition. Murdoch's attack dogs are doing it for us. And if you believe Murdoch's attack dogs, and I know you don't, but if you did, you would believe that we were a marauding horde of control freaks with malignant intent for Australian society. I know this to be true because in New South Wales Legislative Council, where my colleague Helen Westwood, it's good to see Helen here today, wearing a very bright red top, it's great, will testify to this. Whenever I say, not whenever, but usually when a Green says something, we are somehow or other equated to North Korea. You know, if you address it, because it's confused, because it's a North Korean Prius. You should know I don't drive a Prius, but it's a North Korean Prius. Seems to be the standard joke. So, according to Ackerman, Bolt, and Devine, we're some kind of Genghis Khan meets Kim Jong-un, which we are not, and we should not let them do. Now, I know you don't read either Ackerman or Bolt or Devine, but the intensity of their vitriol has driven a kind of osmotic pressure that we all know what they're saying and is infecting our society. There are two traditional reasons why we're called left. The first one is left because we usually sat on opposition in parliaments, and parliaments sat on the left side. I don't subscribe to the view that the left should always be in opposition, and I think there have been amazing social and environmental progresses made by the left being in government or being part of government, both federally and here in New South Wales and around the world. And I pay respects to those people who have been involved in government, including Doug Cameron and Helen Westwood, and the work and the contribution they've made. I'm going to have some harsh things to say about governments, but I don't have that many harsh things to say about Helen or Doug or their side of their party that usually almost always does its best. But what that side, what I do say, we should not believe we should always be in opposition. We should not always be on the left side of parliaments. But I do think we should recognise that social change does not come out of Parliament. Genuine social change comes out of the community. And if we do drive social change from Parliament without bringing the community with us, it will be short-lived. And I quote the carbon price. We won the parliamentary battle. I fear we are losing the community battle. There is only one place that genuine social change happens, and it's right here. It's in the conversations we have with ourselves, with our work colleagues, with our family, with the people we meet in the street. That is where genuine social change comes from. But there's another definition of left, another reason why we're called left, and that is because of the left-handedness of our movement, or the sinister nature of our movement. Now, I don't subscribe to that at all, and I don't wish to be offensive to the cat-handed present. But I do believe there is something true about us being left-brained. We are not constrained by the dominant paradigm. No genuine member of the left says we cannot do this because it has not been done before. No genuine member of the left says we are bound by the traditions. We don't throw out traditions for the sake of throwing them out, but we are not hidebound by them. We understand that there are other things that we can do. Nor do I believe the left is a series of good issues. There are threshold issues the left does believe in. Marriage equality, the reproductive rights of women, asylum seekers, the rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, workers' rights, public schools, TAFEs and universities, disability care, public health, global justice. These are all things we will all get excited about. But I do not believe they're definitive. And in fact, I think if we allow them to be definitive, if we let that to be our definition, that grab bag of things that we feel good about, then we are vulnerable. We are vulnerable to change, we are vulnerable to personality, and we are vulnerable to the underlying uncertainties of what we confront, and we are not addressing the fundamental dynamics of a society that delivers injustice. Therefore, I would argue that if we want to answer the question, what's left, we have to go right to the source of what's left, and that's the opposite of what's left, and that is injustice. And my belief is that what makes one left is an intolerance of injustice, and an intolerance of the concept that injustice is inherent to the human nature. The left neither tolerates injustice, neither tolerates the idea that an outcome from one person should be less than an outcome from another person by way of the accident of their birth, or their language background, or their gender preference. The left does not believe that that should be so, nor does the left believe that there is anything inherent in the laws of physics, the laws of psychology, or the laws of economics that say that it has to be this way. The second defining feature of the left is that we believe in action against injustice. It follows from the first feature. And we believe that that action is best when it is collective. We recognise individual action, individuals putting solar panels on their roofs to address one of the greatest injustices of all, climate change. Climate change, I should have said this before, climate change sits at the heart of injustice. Not just injustice to future generations, but injustice to people who live in coastal areas, the most vulnerable in our society and the most vulnerable on our globe. But injustice means collective action. being the left means collective action. It means believing that not only do we not tolerate it, but we have a way forward. Collective action, not just of governments, but collective action of unions, collective actions of cooperatives, collective actions of communities, collective actions where people get together for the common good. And in some senses, and this is where I get a bit sort of spiritual and misty-eyed, which is hard for an engineer to do, but I'll try it. In some senses, there is a greater good in collective action that goes just beyond the injustice that it addresses. It is a strengthening of our humanity to work together for the common good. It is an understanding that we are more than ourselves, and in my world, it is our immortality. It is our lasting gift to our others and to the future to work together. A key component of collective action is public enterprise. I do not believe you can be on the left and you can destroy a public enterprise. I don't believe there is anything left-wing about privatisation. Whether it is schools or energy, whether it is transport or disability care, privatisation runs counter to the idea that we should be doing things together for the common good. And there's a third and crucial ingredient of being on the left, and that is empowerment. My party refers to it as grassroots democracy, but that's three words where we could use one, so we'll call it empowerment. And empowerment is the crucial and missing ingredient which, in my opinion, drove the Soviet Union, the Marxist-Leninist models of the Soviet Union and China into pathologies. The empowerment of community, the empowerment of households, the empowerment of the people, the idea of the intolerance of elites, the intolerance of the accumulation of power in one set of hands to be used malignantly against another group of people. It is an essential ingredient, and failure to understand the essence of empowerment to create social justice is in the end to undermine everything good that we do. I believe that the union movement, in its 21st century incarnation, has done a lot of good empowerment work of its members. And I think we may hear a bit from Amanda about her union, the ASU, which does a lot of that sort of work, as does the Teachers Federation, as do lots of unions. So, against that definition, how do we stack up? How do we assess where we've been over the last 3 years? I want to enter into now briefly an analysis of some of the things that were done by the Gillard and Rudd government. I want to do so not in the sense of partisanship, because I think partisanship is one of the great enemies, but I want to do so in the sense of honest dialogue. And I also want to do so in the sense that my party, the Greens, had a hand in all of everything I'm going to talk about is equally a reflection on my party, the Greens, as well as on the Labor Party and on the Labor government. And if you believe the right-wing commentators, I know you don't, but if you did, then you believe actually we called the shots and everything bad that happened was actually our fault. So leaving that aside, let me just assess a couple of things. Let's talk briefly about education and the Gonski reforms. The Gonski reforms, as far as public education is concerned, were the greatest step forward that we have seen in 40 years. Not since 1973 have we seen an influx of money into public education, to our public schools, to address the decades of neglect. And I pay tribute to public school teachers and to their unions, state and federal, that won that. It's a great victory, but it has to be understood. And it's a difficult thing for us to now do. But we now have to be honest and assess Gonski good and bad. And we have to understand that Gonski solved half of the problem, the starvation of funds in public education. But it did not solve, but rather perpetuated, the funding injustice of the billions of dollars, the $2.2 billion of federal funds and the $1 billion of state funds that goes to non-government schools every year in New South Wales. It locked in the $66 million of state funding and the $120 million of Commonwealth funding to the state's 99 extremely wealthy, fabulously wealthy private schools. It locked in a future for public education that will always be, until we solve this problem, fighting with one hand tied behind its back. I also want to point out that this was a government that started the rot with tape. This is a government with its entitlement-based funding. locked in a market that's about to happen in New South Wales that will destroy TAFE. And we will be without a world-leading, we will have vandalised a world-leading vocational education system. It is also a government that introduced performance-based pay, school autonomy and My School. It took, along with the extra money, it took a payload of neoliberal poison into public education. And unless and until we confront those realities, we will no longer be able to call ourselves left. Can I also say in the disability area, the NDIS, which delivers about $4 billion of additional funding to disabilities in New South Wales, is a wonderful thing. But what is poorly understood is that the heads of agreement between Premier O'Farrell and then Prime Minister Gillard had a commitment that the New South Wales government would comprehensively privatise ADAC, the Ageing, Disability and Home Care, by 2018. No public sector provision. This was a classic case of confusing empowerment with choice and markets. And by taking away one choice, the choice of being in public sector provision for people with disability, is in fact reduced choice. It is in that's 5 minutes. Okay, I've got 5 minutes to go. I think we need to confront that. When the legislation went through the New South Wales Parliament, 2 people spoke out against it. Myself and my colleague David Shoebridge, but none of us voted against it. It is a collective problem that we have created. It is a collective problem that we have to solve. In terms of climate change, I am critical of where we got to by the end of, although it was my party that engineered this together with the Labor Party, I'm critical of where we ended on the carbon pricing solution. We did not sell it. We did not make it clear that there are enormous benefits of making the transition to 100% renewables. We did not talk about the growth in jobs. We allowed ourselves to be distracted by the myth that it was pushing up power bills and the issues of closing down coal-fired power stations. Yes, we have to close down coal-fired power stations, but no, we do not lose jobs. We gain new jobs. We gain new jobs, and we should have been out there celebrating those new jobs. On asylum seekers, I have to say both parties failed. The Labor Party, because it, in a moment of panic, being driven by the spectre of losing lots of seats in Western Sydney, it did a backflip, and a backflip which I think was unconscionable. But I don't absolve the Greens from this. The Greens did not successfully communicate an alternative view. And in failing to successfully communicate an alternative view, we allowed ourselves to cheat politics of being able to speak to the angry, but not being able to communicate with others who had fears about what influxes, so-called influxes of asylum seekers would need. What we needed and what we failed to do was talk about the alternatives, talk about the benefits of a multicultural society, talk about the humane solutions, talk about the way we can respect our international obligations without locking people up, without turning back the boats, and without putting people into intolerably bad conditions. I believe that the legacy of reform that comes out of the Gillard years and out of the Rudd years was remarkable, and there were some real steps forward, and we should celebrate those. But it was not a consistent message. It was not a message that it was not reform you can believe in. At every step, there was something mixed into the reform that was there to appease the right, to appease the business sector, to appease the voters who were being driven by Murdoch. It was a series of policies of appeasement, and we cannot do that. We cannot do that not just for our own sakes, and not just for the sake of our movement, but for the sake of Australia. If Australia loses its left wing, it cannot fly. It can fly without its right wing now, so it's bad. It fly really well, actually. Let's cross that one out. I want to finish. I also have to say I cannot talk about the left without talking about the legacy of the New South Wales Labor government. And I have to say There is a lot of work that needs to be done in New South Wales before there is another government of the social democratic left in the state. The legacy of not just McDonald and OB, that will last for years, but the legacy of those who have not been those who have not been found to be guilty of corruption, but the legacy of those who took this state down the route of power privatisation, who privatised lotteries, who had more private involvement in water supply than we've ever seen before, who had more private involvement in the delivery of fundamental services, was driven by the myth that we need to maintain a AAA rating.
Green.
There is much that needs to be done in New South Wales, and not just by Labor but also by the Greens, in terms of working out where we go forward with that legacy. And I believe there are two key issues. The first is to confront the electoral challenge, to provide real leadership to the community rather than following the community. Real leadership of ideas, real leadership of vision, real leadership of making the community understand there is an alternative. And secondly, we need to confront the virus of neoliberalism. Every political party, and mine is no exception, is under an attack from neoliberalism, under the attack from the idea that somehow or other there is something wrong with public sector provision, there is something wrong with the idea of regulation, there is something wrong with the idea of people doing it collectively together for the common good. Well, I'll tell you what's wrong with it. What's wrong with it is it works. What's wrong with it from their perspective is that it delivers for the community, it makes us a fairer society, and it makes us a more successful society. We need to keep that message alive, and we need to confront neoliberalism wherever it comes into our parties. Whether it's on disability services, whether it's on energy provision, or whether it's on a discussion about how we're going to confront global welfare, global injustice, or whether it is about climate change. We need to stay true to our beliefs, stay true to the lesson that was taught to us by 100 years of unionism, 100 years of the collective action of workers who stood up and said, this is not about me, this is about us. Thank you very much indeed.